So this afternoon, we're going to begin with Joseph Castor. Joseph Joe Castor, as he puts it in the program catalog, is interested in themes of camaraderie, queerness, sensuality, and sacrifice. He uses photography as a way to frame his experiences through these themes. His models serve the alternate purposes of stand-ins and vessels, reflecting traces of personal experience. Castor received his BFA from Rhode Island College in photography with a minor in art history. Selected works can be seen in publications including Soft Lighting, Cumulus Photo, and Analog Forever magazine. Works shortlisted for this past year's Vogue Italia Photo Vogue Festival, as well as an upcoming exhibition titled Shame Radiant at Red Line Art Center in Denver. And with that, we welcome Joe Castor to start off our afternoon.
All right, so hello everyone. My name is Joseph Castor. I go by Joe, and I'm an artist who primarily uses the camera. I'd like to begin by acknowledging my faculty at UConn, especially my graduate committee, Catherine Myers, Janet Pritchard, and Lori Sloan, as well as my amazing peers and cohort. And I'd finally like to thank anyone who ever cared about me enough to tell me the truth. So thank you again. When I was 11 years old, my mother scolded me for leaving chalky lip marks on the bathroom mirror where I had kissed my own reflection. Hormones raging, I crossed out my eyes as I stood on the counter so my lover could emerge from the blur, not my pimpled reflection, but a body perfected by the mirror in ways I could only ever dream of. I didn't understand then that what I really desired was another boy. The writer Evan Moffat wrote that for Paul Sepuya's self-titled monograph released just last year. And when I read it, I was instantly struck by it. Moffat was discussing the nature of reflections, literally and figuratively, and photography's ability to capture such things. When I was a similar age, I would begin my days, especially in the summer, waking up and quietly viewing myself in the mirror. The wonder of when I could become more beautiful, more manly, and when I could be loved by someone else, perhaps by the other boys my age. I couldn't stand to see my reflection for long, and I could barely see myself in a photograph. So when I first picked up the camera when I was 13, I knew I had to be making photographs of someone else. Now, I didn't know at the time, but the photographs I would make were always about me, how I was feeling, how I felt about my body, my queerness, my emotional state of mind. While photography can be so much about reflections, I see the people I photograph as reflections of myself, who I'd like to become, and who can perform what I'd like to express. So continuing this narrative of when I was young, being from Rhode Island and growing up in Rhode Island, I was baffled really to learn that not everybody had an ocean or access to such luxuries. I imagined the rest of the world had the ability to go to the seafront and to the ocean. So I spent many, if not all, of my summer days at the beach. Upon returning home on such days, this kind of return to the neighborhood, I would play with the other children who lived in houses no farther than 2 doors down. You know, our world seems small, but it seems small, but it really was quite vast with our imaginations, creating dwellings, places to hide, or places to be heroically or maniacally sacrificed, when playing pretend, of course. I was embarrassed the moment that everybody grew out of these role-playing games that we did. The sharp moment someone would call me a faggot will make you never ask to play again. The idea of being the stereotypical hero was something I was always chasing. In this photo, a young man grips a silver sword, his arm almost too slender to wield it, adorned with a sword tattoo himself, as if writing one's own destiny of triumph. This role-playing, becoming someone else, is important to my work. The desire to sift through these masculine tropes in search for heroism, sacrifice, and camaraderie are all things born out of my childhood. So in Collier Shore's Wrestlers series, she examined camaraderie and brotherhood firsthand through her lens. The homoerotic nature of wrestling and the closeness of these young men was something that exhilarated me when I first saw this work about 5 years ago. She was expressing so many things I didn't quite understand yet about myself. What was the difference between homoerotic touch and actual queer desire? Is there even a difference? Wrestling for sport could be considered homoerotic because of its context. This is what's supposed to be happening, right? There's supposed to be touching. I find that homoerotic touch and queer desire are both heavily dependent on context. A touch on the sports field versus a touch in the bedroom are two different things that could elicit the same response. So much of my life has been discerning these interactions with the other men in my life, wondering what it all means and what do I want out of these people? Is it love, brotherhood, or friendship? And the short answer is all of it. I made a transition to begin photographing actual siblings in my work. I was astounded by the closeness of the people that I was photographing. The ability for them to have such intimate moments with each other was something that confused me and left me with a real sense of longing. I always wished to have a relationship like that with my own brothers, but it just wasn't the case. So I looked to fulfill that in other people. In these two images, two separate groups of brothers have these symbiotic moments with one another, almost attempting to become one singular being. Whether a moment of rest or exhaustion, they join together, something I wished I was comfortable enough doing with my own siblings. So in speaking of siblings, in John Salisbury's Drew and Jimmy, Salisbury photographically details the lives of his two cousins who are brothers, photographing them as they grow from boys into young men, and highlighting the relationship that one builds to their siblings, being forced to live under the same roof. This project important to Salisbury, for it was mirroring his relationship with his own brother, who tragically dies in his late teens. And similarly, pictured on the right in James Hurst's The Scarlet Ibis, an older brother attempts to train his disabled brother by pushing him to his limits physically in an attempt to idealize what he thinks is a proper brotherly relationship. This ultimately leads to the death of his younger brother, where he tragically dies on their forced pathway home. This idea of death becomes increasingly more interesting to me as I'm making photographs. In this photograph, we see another figure's feet poking out from the shrubbery. Is he dead, sleeping, or badly hiding in a game of hide and seek? And in this painting, titled Untitled Outing by Wang Xingwei, I draw some of my recent inspiration. A boy pulls a corpse from the underbrush, and the title reveals the multiplicity of the situation. Does an outing refer to an outing of the day, to the local park or playground, or the outing of this corpse? So my obsession with death started really young. Being raised Catholic, there's an ever-looming fear of hellfire, or a fear of monotony, personally, a monotony of eternal happiness. And these were both things that I feared greatly. I began researching ways of dying when I was young, from least to worst painful, and what others thought about life after death, as if anybody really knows. So here, a pale, grayed body, peppered with grass, seems to be pulled out of some underdwelling, appearing dead, splayed out as if to be studied. In these stunning, luscious images of joy and intimacy, Tyler Mitchell's exhibition, I Can Make You Feel Good, builds a photographic series envisioning Black utopia. Upon seeing this work, I couldn't help but face my interest in the dystopic. Like heaven and hell, utopia and dystopia are both unique in their isolation and in their destiny, where activities are reflections of potential societies. So in my dystopia, the days are monotonous. This idea that dystopian suffering becomes so commonplace that it is now the new normal. Here, two brothers almost attempt a joining of hands, but are disrupted by the freshly severed head of a deer. Is this deer for sustenance or sacrifice? And I often wonder why boys and men need such violence in order to become closer, as if normal, intimate interactions are reserved for someone else. In this image of blood in the snow, it makes no difference whether it's real or fake. The symbol of some violent act with no perpetrator visible shows an interest in the liminal moments of this narrative. Not the beginning or the end, but the strange bits in between or after the climactic. And with the arrival of winter in these photographs, time marches on, leaving summer scenes and returning to them once more is a test to the elapse of time. How long do these people in these photographs live out their lives? Through seasons, centuries, or eons? And with these antlers buried in a snowy tomb, they resemble a grave. What becomes of the deer? What remains when all the people are gone? I'd like to think of my work as cyclical, always returning to one scene or another, ending summer, entering winter, and returning back again, leaving the day and entering the night. Here, when the moon turns the ocean water into cream, this signals this appearance of nighttime in my work. In Barry Jenkins' 2016 film Moonlight, lighting and visual aesthetics were extremely important to the film, alongside the narrative of a boy navigating his identity through being Black and through his own blossoming queer identity. Jenkins offers visual feats on lighting the cast of his film and the depiction of evening light when it tenderly touches the body. Entering the nighttime, a quite mysterious place, I began to wonder what moonlight could look like in my work. Through this simulated dramatic blue, it's as if the moon had been replaced with an indigo orb, modeling bodies in rest, sleep, and introspection. Bodies that seek refuge in the endless blue night begin to form out of this darkness, like Endymion being put into an eternal sleep by the moon goddess Selene so that they could be together in his dreams. In Greek mythology, the people in my photographs remain frozen in these scenes of seemingly endless rest. So growing up and watching the anime Sailor Moon, I really wanted to embody every part of it, the magic powers, the transformations, and the battling of evil. In a particular episode, a character has an apocalyptic vision of the world ending, and with everything swathed in red, the world erupts and crumbles. And upon rewatching this episode, I wondered how this redness and the color red could make its way into my work. Gathering by fire, another nighttime activity. In this image, a young man stands looking beyond perceived flames. With his hands pushed back, we wonder if he is bound, about to be tipped into a menacing lake of fire. Making images in front of flames or fire has been an important part of my work. I'm drawn to the sense of gathering that's surrounding a campfire and flame can form, the glow of red faces peering out of the darkness, or the associations with death, sacrifice, and primality. Like the image of the sword, different symbols appear, different roles and different characters dip in and out of their private worlds, as if to be perceived together. Animalistic transformations, illusions of sex beyond procreation, and a slick glistening in the eyes are the things that build up this red evening. So this image invokes a final kind of memory of my youth. When I was young, I can still see my reflection in the evening. Before my shower, I would watch myself in the bathroom mirror for as long as I could stand it. I watched the dirt that had accumulated on my feet from the day bleed off me in the running water. As I wait for a more beautiful version of myself to appear, I smell smoke, wondering if the world has finally ended, or if it's just many small fires throughout the neighborhood. So that concludes my talk. I'm happy to answer any questions you all might have for me, so thank you for listening.
Maybe you could start us off by talking a little bit about transformation. So there's a theme of transformation that runs through your work. There's also a process of transformation that goes on across the 3 years of the program.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Could you talk to us about that a little bit?
Sure. So I guess first I'll say I definitely feel that there's a strong relationship between my own personal transformation and the transformation that consists in my interest in photography. So when I first came into this program, I was very insecure about my kind of blossoming queer identity and my sexuality. I was coming to terms with the fact that I was gay, and more and more that kind of inched out of my photographs as I kept getting more comfortable with myself and exploring certain topics, even to the point of depicting nudity in my work. There was a time where I didn't depict those things. So me getting more comfortable with myself allowed me to really begin to explore the things that really interested me in photography. And then just sheerly from a place in the photographs, I'm very fascinated with animal to human or human to animal transformations and how they're depicted in media. I referenced The Scarlet Ibis by James Hurst, and now while there's no literal transformation of animal, there is symbology in regards to animals in the human body. So that's really a place of interest for me in my work, but I hope that answers the question. Thank you, Janet.
That's good enough for now. We have oral still to go. So Catherine Myers has asked a question. She says, how are you dealing with power in your staged relationships? As some of the figures look older than others, and a viewer looking at the images wouldn't understand that they are siblings. Although, to my knowledge, not all of them are siblings. So if you could talk about those relationships and power, please.
So I think that one thing I've always struggled with is who holds the most power when we make photographs. Is it the photographer? Is it the model? Or is it the viewer who takes a lot of interpretations when they're viewing things quietly? I think that my relationship to power in regards to how I photograph these people surely comes down to me sharing as much information as I can with them about the themes that I'm working with, the ideas that I'm exploring, and how I'm going to be using their image by giving them as much agency as possible and making sure that there's no surprises when all of a sudden they see an image and they're like, oh, I didn't know I was going to be seen like that. So that's kind of how I parse my relationship to power with my models. I think, was there a second part to that question? I forgot.
Well, it was the issue of the age difference between some of the groupings and some of the fact that some of the photographs are of siblings and others are not.
Mm-hmm. So in regards to age, a lot of everybody in this work that I've shown today are young adults, but there definitely is a kind of ambiguity with some people's age, like some people look a lot younger than others. And in relationship to the photographs of brothers, one thing that always interests me, kind of going back to power, is that relationship between older brother and younger brother. And that how the way that someone's appearance can kind of change the shifting roles of who appears younger, who appears older, in and out of who holds power over one another. So I hope that answers that question a little bit.
I think that addresses Catherine's question, but it raises another one for me. If the viewer is unable to tell the dynamics of the relationship of your models, in other words, if some of them are siblings and some of them are not, and if we can't tell, that then leads me to believe that it doesn't matter to you whether we can tell or not.
Well,
but if it does, might you address that differently in the future?
I mean, sure. But the thing is, a lot of the times that with the things I'm dealing with the people that I'm photographing, kind of what I alluded to a little in the talk is that the people that I'm photographing, while being extremely important to me and my personal relationships with them, they're all people that I know. They really do become actors in order to convey ideas that I'd like them to. I'm not necessarily always interested in you knowing everything about them personally, but what they can do for an image and how they can kind of push my interests along. So while, it's important for me that these are brothers, and maybe through reading an artist statement in some of them that they're brothers, it might not be necessarily important for you to know that every single time, because I think that there can be a new narrative that's built in viewing and not knowing.
So I think that raises another interesting question, but we're running out of time and I'll have another chance to talk to you. So we have one more question and then we'll have to move on to the next individual. But briefly, Liz Ellenwood asks if you can talk a bit about your switch to photography, film versus digital, and how it's affected your process and finished work.
Sure, that's a great question. I I originally only photographed digital, and to be honest, I was a little insecure about film and the analog process, just because I have such a panicked nature about making the photograph, like, and the idea that when we make a photograph analog and we can't see it right away, I was very concerned and distressed by that. The fact that there could be the potential that everything's gone really terrified me. And also, I was really looking for a kind of different way of working and a different kind of final product that I was hoping film could give me. But then it also kind of created this subtle relationship to where, there was a new excitement of photographing, not seeing what I made, getting it developed, anxiously waiting for the things to return to me, the potential of things not even working. And then when they arrive and they're maybe not even what I was thinking, it's more gratifying. And it also kind of mimics the sense of longing that I feel in regards to my photographs and chasing certain relationships. Film kind of mimics that for me. So hope that answers your question, Liz.